My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. I'm only here to even a score, whoa. My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. We down right now, but did it before, whoa. See from here we gon' up, made the call, I shown up. Now the game is on up, say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up. See from here we gon' up, made the call, I shown up. Now the game is on up, say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up.
What up, Night Nation? Welcome to the show and the United Ones podcast, episode number 85. We are the only podcast that features a former UCF national champion, a former UCF radio host, an ESPN analyst, and hoops player, an infamous, yes, that's infamous rapper, our resident influencer and IG star, shooting the breeze, talking UCF sports. And remember to like and follow us on YouTube, IG, and check out the 70 plus teams and conferences on the College Huddle, Big 12 Huddle, and many other things to come. First of all, thank you guys, and to Josh, tip of the cap, for giving me a break last week. It was my birthday. I am 44, folks. It just keeps rolling on, but I'm excited to be back here with you with some of our friends. Unfortunately, Ben Stout won't be able to join us for the next couple of weeks. I know we were going to do a basketball preview, but he has promised something's come up, and he has promised that he will do that full basketball preview for us in the future. As a reminder, the show is interactive, so thank you and shout out to Mike and some of the others that were working with us last week and interacting with us. You make the show better. We do this for you. Thank you for the folks, the new followers, those folks that are commenting. And without further ado, let me go ahead and welcome my cohort for this week to the stage, our very own resident IG influencer, UCF Football Updates.
Me,
Alan Levin. Come on, Alan.
I was waiting for you to introduce me, and just didn't happen.
Welcome back to the show, man. We missed you. Let me see that hair flip, bro. Since Nobra isn't here to do it. There it is. As a reminder, folks, we have promised that once we hit 1,000 subs, Alan will cut his lovely locks. Yes, I'm bringing that back. Alan thought we forgot that. However, something exciting that happened this month. Over 12,000 of you decided to share your time with us, and we had 12,000 views, which is a new milestone for the United Ones. And considering it's the off season, it's even better. So thank you all for your support. For those of you that aren't subscribed, please make sure you do subscribe because we do it for you. Make sure you interact, and those that commented, thank you too. So Alan, welcome back to the show. Lots and lots and lots of cool stuff to talk about this week. We have Knights going into the portal. We have Knights coming in as transfers. We have a draft to talk about. We have UCF baseball to talk about. Trey will be joining us a little bit later on in the show. No hoops anymore because that's off for the season. We have baseball to talk about. I don't know. I don't know. That's all I'm going to say is I don't know. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll shout out all of our lovely listeners who are commenting. And then, of course, we'll do your Alan's Oxymoronic stat of the week, and we'll give updates on all other UCF sports, including our rowing team, as Josh has promised to do Coxswain karaoke as of last show. And we're going to hold him to that. So if you want to see him in a high side, it's coming, folks, unfortunately for everyone. All right. Let's get right into it and talk a little UCF football. 10 Knights entered in the portal just under the deadline for the portal. The portal has closed now. The coaches can pivot their attention to the recruiting side of things now. But Alan, why don't you take us through the Knights that have entered the portal?
Yeah, so 10 more Knights for now we've had 15 total transfers in the 2025 cycle that have that are outgoing. The There were some big, I would say, names on here, but no one that was actually proven that's left. No playmakers from last year, big time playmakers, I'll say. No guys that were really expected to do big things this year. And maybe unless you consider Rizk, someone that because he played last year was expected to start, but that clearly wasn't materializing. But here are the new names that have entered since last week when the portal first opened. So first of all, you have Quay Birdsong. Again, was a big name on paper, but obviously didn't play in his lone year here at UCF, whether that's Gus's fault, whether that's what he wasn't ready, whatever. But we never really saw what his production could be. So maybe it's just more of a potential that we've lost. What next is wide receiver Kason Stokes. Again, a guy that had a former three-star guy was, said that he had a lot of potential, but again, UCF didn't have a lot of wide receiver depth and he wasn't exactly playing last year. Offensive tackle Chase Malamala basically came in for, a spring and then left. DB Cedric Hawkins, again, a guy that's already been transferred twice in his young career. Now it will be a third time. He was part of the fall portal class, so literally stayed at UCF for 3-4 months before transferring. So not really a loss because he never really played or we never really got to see him at all. Tight end Elijah Brown, again, same thing. A 2 transfer guy, was at Alabama originally, then FAU, and then came to us in December, and now he's out. The big one of this list that we'll probably all recognize is Andrew Harris. Obviously, linebacker, former 4-star, one of Gus's bigger kind of name guys that he got out of the high school recruiting ranks. He started to play on special teams last year. He went through some injuries and things like that, started to get a little bit more playing time as the year progressed, as Gus started to put in more of those younger guys. So that's probably the biggest name and probably the biggest producer that we lost on paper and otherwise. So that one hurts a little bit. Next is offensive lineman Jakaya Leftwich, UNC transfer. Again, was someone that just got here in the fall, so kind of no loss there. We didn't get to see him at all. He was only here for 3 months. He was in and out. And then same thing, 2 more that we have also. These were fall transfers that came in, and that was DB Brandon Jacob and linebacker Jashad Presley. So, I mean, out of the 10 transfers, literally, I think if I'm counting this correctly, 4 of them were the only ones that were actually on this roster prior to December's transfer portal. So, it's not like we lost, one of our biggest guys from last year. We didn't lose someone that we're accustomed to seeing play. And I would make the argument that probably only about 2 of these guys were really expected potential wise to really do kind of big things. So, it always is a little annoying to lose guys, but we knew as soon as the spring window opened up that we were going to have both outgoing and incoming transfers. So that's kind of the rundown. We now sit at 15 total guys in the portal. There's still about another 2 weeks before it closes. So don't be surprised if a couple more enter.
I thought the portal was over to be able to enter this past, I think it was today or yesterday, the portal closed for new guys to enter.
Oh, I thought it lasted for like a month. Maybe I'm incorrect there.
Well, let's check on that. While we're doing that, let's bring in another transfer portal who's transferring from the OR. Trey Neal, welcome back to the show, my friend.
I might be one of the original transfer portal guys.
Yeah, well, you did transfer to Nebraska.
Transfer portal.
Oh my goodness.
NIL.
Trey's in here on the private chat saying, "Let me in." I was like, "Well, hold on. We've got to find an opportunity." As you found an opportunity to go to Nebraska. Anyway, that's old news. But let's talk a little bit about some of these Knights that entered the portal. I know, Alan, for you, a lot of these guys, other than Andrew Harris, really weren't, big losses. Dylan Rizk, I do think that that's addition by subtraction. I don't think Dillon was going to, unfortunately, get an opportunity here, and I hope he lands on his feet and does the same as what Mikey Keene does. And I feel like it was kind of that kind
Pause there. Sorry, he landed at Stanford, or signed with Stanford.
Well, there you go. Stanford hasn't done much in football lately, but he's now in the ACC. So, let's hope he can make the roster, at least in the 2D. Yeah, great degree. So that's good for his future when it comes to that. But let's go through the list. Some of these that are kind of jump out to me. Obviously, Andrew Harris. We talked about it a couple weeks ago or 3 weeks ago about how the linebacker situation at UCF forever has been a situation. And, when it comes to Andrew Harris, we were expecting a lot of big things. He was making some noise in spring. So we were expecting him to at least be in the 2 deep when it came to this. So I'm a little surprised at this one. As you said, he had some injuries last year that slowed him down, but I kind of figured he'd stick around at least for another season and see where it took us. But, that's the way of the world these days. Cedric Hawkins, like you said, he was a big name. He was a 5-star, I believe, if not a 4-star, but I think he was a 5-star. He went to Ohio State originally. He was defensive back, so he played corner and safety, if I recall correctly. But he was expected to make some noise. He was a splash transfer here. Like I said, rated very highly. We brought a bunch of DBs in this cycle. Didn't seem to be making much noise at all. So I'm not really surprised at that. It seems like one of those guys that kind of transfers around based on potential, but doesn't stick around long enough to make a difference. And so, good luck to him. But big name, but not a lot of expectations versus Andrew Harris, which I expected to get snaps this year. Offensive tackle Chase Malamalala. I know I murdered that, but that's okay. I did my best. I'm actually disappointed with this one. He's an offensive tackle that was coming in, and we have a lot of openings along the offensive line. So for him, and talking to the coach, our offensive line coach, his expectation is that he's going to be rotating these guys quite a bit. He's not a guy that's going to stick with 5 and try to ride the whole season out with the 5 offensive linemen. So those folks that are there would expect to have snaps and be able to get game time. So I'm a little surprised at that one. And you can never have enough O-line depth, especially with everything that all the moving pieces that we've got going on right now there. Kason Stokes was another one that I was expecting him to compete from a wide receiver perspective in the rotation. But again, we brought in a lot of wide receivers, and we seem to have solidified around a solid group of them. Unfortunately, I don't think there was any room for him in the room, and that's what happens. And then Quay Birdsong, I had really high expectations for him. He seemed to be competing as well. His name was being bandied about quite a bit in the spring. But it seems like, again, a crowded cornerback room or defensive back room. Unfortunately, he decided to take his talents elsewhere. I wish, so of all of them, I wish Birdsong would have stuck around. I would have liked to see Chase at least for this season. And, Andrew Harris, those are the big 3 for me when I look at that list, as far as those are actual losses or potential losses as we kind of move forward.
I feel like, for the most part, I agree with the who you feel are the biggest losses. Although I will say, I feel the positions that we lost were probably the most expendable, just in the sense of like, okay, so cornerback, we knew DB, like we brought in an insane amount of DBs between the portal and high school. I mean, it was something like 13 or 14 of them. It was just not possible for all of them to stay. It wouldn't even make sense. If anything, I think that we should, I'm glad some of them are leaving so we could have some other positions. Not saying I'm happy that it's Birdsong or that it's Hawkins per se, but there was a gluttony of DBs there that we just, I think, took too many. And I get, the reasoning, because we probably, Frost probably knew some guys were going to leave. So I think DB was a position we could afford to lose. And we'll talk about this in a second, but we already got another one back as far as incoming transfers. And then OL, offensive line, I felt obviously, like you said, you can never have too many, but that was another where we took 6 offensive linemen in the fall transfer portal, as well as landed 2 in the high school class. So again, when you talk about, what is that, 21 players between 2 positions, I feel like those were 2 positions we had a little bit more leeway to lose. And even wide receiver too, with all the transfers. I think, tight end, linebacker, that was a little bit thinner. Those hurt a little bit more just from the amount of depth we have. But wide receiver, DB, and offensive line, I think we could afford to lose a couple of guys, and at least none of them were like anticipated starters.
Yeah, I think with O-line, when you're talking about O-line, the fact that we're planning on rotating them, and a lot of these guys are plug and play. Remember, I don't think we're going to go back to the days of offensive line like we had in Frost Part 1, right? And we're not going to have the tall, lean guys that way. I think that's not that we're not going to go back to that. So to me, I do think there is some change in talent based on what they're trying to run. Same way with defensive backs, in different defensive schemes. Some like more lanky defensive backs, others. And if I remember correctly, Birdsong, how tall was Birdsong? Do you remember? I think he was around 6 foot, right? So we seem to be going more lanky with our defensive backs and guys that are going to play the ball as opposed to the body. And
6'3".
He's how tall?
6'3".
Wow, 6'3". So
you know what? I think that was a typo on my fault. He was actually a linebacker, not a DB. That's my fault there. So
okay. Yeah.
But now that I think about it, I was like, that didn't sound right. He was a linebacker. So yeah.
That makes more sense. So Birdsong, again, I heard some noise in the spring about him and his name being bandied about. So I'm really surprised at that. Cedric Hawkins, like I said, I wasn't surprised, but I know we took a lot of linemen, but we're in the middle of transitioning our offense. I want as many offensive linemen as I possibly can, especially with the size that Malamala was. So again, I murdered that. I'm sorry, man. Sorry, Chase. But I would have liked to keep the offensive lineman. Ja'Kai Leftwich, I hadn't heard much about. So that really, I don't think was a big loss, but I do think Chase would have gotten some playing time, and I get it, but I don't know. I would have liked to see him stay. Trey, what do you think? I mean, when it comes to offensive linemen and linebackers, losing those 2 position groups, what are your thoughts on that, being a former player?
Yeah, I mean, you never want to lose guys. You hit it. You never want to lose guys in the trenches, in my opinion. Just because that depth, it seems, is what you need the most. Like, you can never have enough good linemen. Now, what does that say about them? I don't know. I mean, I didn't go to any practices, sadly. But maybe he felt he could, had a better opportunity somewhere else. Well, that's the sad part about the portal is kids are gonna just, if they feel like they have a better opportunity, they're just gonna jump in. But it always sucks to lose them. Linebacker wise, Andrew Harris, I think, as a recruit, he was one of the big get. Like, he was a big get. So you always want those guys to pan out. For some reason, it didn't. I don't know why he didn't play last year either. I thought he should have been some kind of rotation, but he didn't play a lot last year either. So, maybe it's just change of scenery. Sometimes that's what guys need, is just change of scenery. But they brought in guys. So, to be honest, I knew this was going to happen. There's going to be probably more. Well, if you guys said that, that's the end of them, they could enter. But I always thought, after spring, everybody stays. But then you kind of get that reality of kind of where the coaches start leaning, who they kind of favor. You might not even fit in the scheme. That's another fair point too. Like, I think Dylan Rizk probably left just because he probably didn't fit with what Frost wanted to do. And I don't even know what Frost wants to do, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, Dillon is more of a pocket passer.
Yeah.
That tried to get a little bit of escapability going,
correct.
Right?
Yeah. And I mean, the guys obviously would, take the quarterbacks he brought in and the guys that have stayed, they're all the uber athletic guys, who might not be the best throwers. So regardless, it sucks, but it's a part of it. But the good thing is we have some of the freshmen that come in, you know, in the summer and probably almost a month from now. And some of them are going to kind of fill in that position as far as the depth piece. So that's what I'm excited about. You know, it sucks to see some of these talented guys walk, but that's a part of the business now. So,
well, I will say this too. What we're getting ready to swiv it to is the guys that we brought in the transfer portal, right? So when it comes to the guys that we brought into the transfer portal, some people are looking at this and they're seeing things like Bethune-Cookman, Chattanooga, FAU, Limestone, and it's like, honestly, not really that impressive from where they're coming from. So I'm looking forward to what Alan kind of shares about who these guys actually are and why they're a good fit. But I will say this too. You know, when it comes to this, these guys seem like depth pieces just to fill roster spots. There's a couple of them on there that are pretty good. It seems like FAU has become our new feeder school. We had some folks that came from FAU in the past 3 years, and this year as well. A few that came in during the earlier transfer cycle. So it'll be interesting. But I'm really interested. Alan, tell us a little bit more about the new guys that are coming in and whether we should be excited about them or if they're just filling holes.
Obviously, they're not coming from the most exciting schools, but I don't think that's been Frost's MO. He's not going to be Gus that goes necessarily and gets that super flashy guy from an Ohio State or Alabama. Not to mention, you know, those guys aren't always coming here unless they maybe, you know, like a Javon Baker that never really played, then they're transferring here. So I'm okay with the schools we've seen over the past 5 years. We'll talk about this a little bit. Mac McWilliams, where did he come from? The group of 5, and he just got drafted in the NFL. So it's not really, the school doesn't mean much in my opinion. They maybe were under recruited as high schoolers, but started to ball out in their first stints in the group of 5 or D2, and does not mean they can't do good at UCF. I think a former Power 5 recruit or former Power 5 player has just as good or just as little of a chance of succeeding as a group of 5 guy at UCF. We've seen it happen over the last 3 years. Guys that we thought were going to be great because they came from, you know, top tier school and didn't pan out, and vice versa. In terms of, you know, the 5 new guys we got, obviously the biggest one that really stands out is Davi Belfort. You know, anytime you get a quarterback, I think that is obviously notable news. We already, you know, landed 2 transfer quarterbacks in the portal overall, and Davi makes the 3rd. And obviously the opening, you know, happened due to Dylan Rizk transferring out. Belfort is an interesting prospect. First of all, if you're an MMA fan, he is Vitor Belfort's son. You know, MMA legend, actually has a gym down here in Fort Lauderdale, an MMA gym, retired now. And his son, Davi, had a really good career at Western, which is actually Davi played in Davie. Western's right down the street from me. They have a pretty good program. Was an Under Armour All-American in high school, had all the statistics in the world, all the accolades in high school, got offers from Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, you name it. You could look at his, you know, his rivals offer list. It's basically the who's who of college programs. You know, obviously committed to Virginia Tech, and was only there a year. He redshirted last year. He was kind of the 3rd string guy there, but he's a dual threat quarterback. Had, you know, his senior year at Western, had over 500 rushing yards. So this guy can do with his feet and his arms. Looks to be a very promising prospect, and seems to have a really, really good attitude. Apparently he told Frost he just wants the chance to compete for QB1. He's not expecting any sort of handout or expecting to, you know, to get the gig automatically or anything like that. So, you know, I think he definitely is an exciting get. When you talk about, you know, I think we've all talked about Taven Jackson being the front runner, but Cam Flancher's making some moves. But there's no reason why Davi Belfort maybe couldn't come in here and win this job. 5'11", 200 pounds, was a top top 100 recruit in the state of Florida coming out of high school. Really, and he also reclassified from the 2025 class of 2024. So he's a young guy. He's obviously probably needs to develop, but seems to have all the physical traits and everything that you would look for in a quarterback. He's just obviously raw. So probably not the front runner, but he's going to come in here and compete. And obviously when schools like Alabama and Clemson were offering, clearly they saw something in him. So I think this is an exciting, get for UCF. And now we have 3 quarterbacks, competing for this gig going into 2025. But before I move on to the next guys, I'd like to, get your thoughts, because quarterback is always a big position when you land it.
Well, I mean, what we had talked about this whole time was that we thought that Frost would go out to get someone else that could compete once Rizk left, right? We weren't expecting them to just do a backfill type of thing. We've got Jakuri that's still back there, right? And we've got the guy from Indiana who was expected to compete for, the starting job at Indiana. Indiana did one of their weird years where they're good, and they were good last year. Now, granted, their schedule wasn't that great, right? So take it with a grain of salt, but they still had a double-digit win season and played pretty well. So I like the fact that Scottfrost brought in someone to compete for the job. Whether I think he's truly competing for the job yet, I don't know. I think part of that's going to be how quickly he can pick up a playbook and what he does when he's under pressure. He may be one of those kids that has the physical attributes and obviously was a very successful high school quarterback. So to me, I mean, if you think back to where UCF was, 3 or 4 years ago and what a QB room depth looked like, we didn't have a Miami 4-star player and Jakuri Brown, another P5 transfer that was expected to start at a 10-win season. And then we've got the young buck here, who to me is more the upside type pick, right? So we'll see what he does. But to me, I think that's a good thing. I think it gives him an opportunity to kind of hone his skills. As you said, he reclassified. You talked a lot about P5 transfers versus G5 or G6 now. I don't know. Is it G7 at this point? Who knows? The size difference is really the difference between a quote unquote P5 player versus a G5 player. It's, do they have the frame? Do they have the measurables? How do they project, right? That's really the difference. And like you said, Mac McWilliams is a perfect example. He wasn't the tallest guy, but he played really, really well, and he played well for us and got drafted. Trey, when we think about your guys' teams, and how many of those guys went on to the NFL, right? Or even back to Blake Bortles and those times. So again, I think it's great that we have another quarterback, but this to me is a potential pick, meaning let's see what he's got. He seemed to be talented in high school. Let's see how he does in our system. And can he at least push or be a good backup to either Jakuri Brown, or our Taven Jackson, right? So it'll be really interesting, but I'm glad we went and got somebody who will be pushing, and it seems like he's going to be doing that.
Yeah, even like when you talked about it, Alan, like, why are we getting these guys from Limestone or Kennesaw State? It works kind of like you said. It works both ways. Like,
hold on, who do we get from Kennesaw State?
No, I'm just saying.
I'm just joking.
Yeah,
but, it's like how, teams were probably poaching RJ Harvey off of our roster from, those big time, not saying
they were trying.
Yeah. Like that's just the trickle down effect, like when teams see talent, they're going to go try to poach it quickly. That's just how the business works, and vice versa. There's the guys that you're like, why didn't he work at Alabama? Sometimes those guys hit. I mean, you look at Aaron Robinson, he just couldn't get on the field at Bama. Comes here, turns into a 3rd-round draft pick. Like that happened. And you have guys, Javon Baker, same thing. And then you have sometimes where it doesn't work out. And that's across the country. It's not just here. Like, that's just guys have one, you got to evaluate the talent. Do you think you can utilize it? And then you have to develop it. Alabama, it's harder as far as trying to develop. If you don't flash early, they go get somebody else. They're just
Gus wasn't going to develop it. I mean,
and that's the issue. Like, I mean, if you look on paper, a lot of those rosters, we should be, like I always said, we were probably the most talented, if not the most talented, if not the second most talented team in the conference on paper. It's just could never develop it, can never get guys to play at their max potential. Coach Frost, in the past with UCF, he developed that talent, you know, and he honed it. And just the little guys we could get. I mean, Richie Grant, 2-star NFL guy. Tristan Hill, 2-star NFL guy. You know, a lot of players that made a lot of plays weren't the highly
Tristan Hill was a 2-star? I thought he was at least a 3-star.
I think he was a 2-star. Maybe a 3-star. But, like, under-recruited. Like, he was getting recruited to Georgia Tech to play O-line. Like, he was severely under-recruited in Virginia. Like, you know, so Otis Anderson, Adrian Kitt, like, that's just the names of those guys. But then you have guys that didn't pan out too. Like, that's just how it works. So, you know, I wouldn't look past, you know, oh, he's from Limestone or Kennesaw State. Like, wait till you see how they play, because like Alan hit it perfectly on the head. Sometimes guys aren't physically developed as 18-year-olds. Sometimes they're not physically developed at 19. Sometimes it's 20, 21 guys hit their like athletic peak, you know. So, and that's how you come across these kind of players. I mean, the number 1 draft pick had 0 stars.
Yeah, that's crazy. Cam Ward. How did Cam Ward have 0 stars? Like, I don't understand that.
I just think it doesn't matter anymore. Like with this portal, like you're going to see guys that maybe get under recruited, and they know within a year if they do good at their G5, their D2, they can go transfer. Like I don't think it matters. Obviously, you know, stars matter to a degree, but in some respects they've mattered always. In some respects they've never mattered. So I'm not really worried about the school, because how many instances in over the last 3 years have we landed this former 5-star and they never, if it's a former 5-star that's transferred 1 to 2 times already, you can't name one example at UCF where that worked out. Jordan Johnson, that wide receiver for Notre Dame, didn't play a single down here. The kid from Terrence, what was the Terrence or whatever, he was a former 5-star. Yeah, didn't play a single down here. You know, this DB Cedric Hawkins, 4-star, didn't even last 3 months. They're transferring multiple times for a reason. Yes, you have guys like Dillon Gabriel that transfer 3 times and work out. But in general, when you talk about the guy that hasn't played at multiple other stops and is transferring and was a former 5-star, it doesn't work out. So for me, I'd rather have that dog from FAU or Limestone that played on the actual field and isn't just an on-paper recruit.
Yeah. And and like you said, they put out good tape against the competition they're playing. So you're like, okay, he can play in this league, or he might be able to play in this league. Like that's the thing that I would rather take most of the time than just, oh, he was a 5-star backup at Alabama. I don't have any tape on him. I just know he was a 5-star backup.
Right.
Well, you know, that can be great, or that can be like, I see why he never played at Alabama. You know, like it can go both ways. Whereas the guy, you know what you're getting from the kid from FAU. You know he's a good player. He might not be an elite player.
So let me kind of dip a spoon and stir this Kool-Aid a little bit, right? Because like, I'm sorry, but there's a difference between FAU and Limestone, and
1,000%.
There is.
Like, and Chattanooga and Bethune-Cookman, right? Do I think that there's guys out there that slip through the cracks for whatever reason and round out into shape? Sure. But I do think that, I mean, look at Mike Hughes, right? Mike Hughes came here. He made an immediate impact. He was a 4-star player when he started here, right? So
he was starting at North Carolina too.
Like, I know that. I get that, right? But at the end of the day, what I'm saying is, yes, as many Cedric Hawkins as we have, there's a whole lot more of those kind of transfers coming in and making the 2 deep. And again, I would be careful to dismiss too much of dipping into the Bethune-Cookmans and Chattanoogas of the world, right? But at the same time, I feel, and again, Alan, I want you to educate me on these guys. I feel like outside of maybe Belfort and maybe Jayden Williams, I think everybody else that we brought to the table here, there's a reason. Yeah, they're depth pieces, and there's a reason they were where they were. So
yeah, I agree with you, Roger. There is a difference between, you know, FAU, a a legitimate G5 program versus Limestone, who just got rid of all athletics at their school. There's definitely a difference. And I am more so talking about the G5s we're getting. When you talk about Limestone and Bethune, that is a little bit different story.
Rock.
What was that?
Yeah.
Or Slippery Rock University.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there is a difference there, but those are fewer and far. I know Frost got another guy from Limestone in the previous portal window, but overall, I was more talking about the G5s. But I think these guys are nice depth pieces that you need some of those guys. There's injuries in football. These are guys that are going to be hungry. They're going to want to play. They're probably very enthusiastic about the jump, getting to go from a D2 to a Power 4 program in in 1 year like that. So I bet you they're gonna play their butts off and really try. But to kind of move on to the who else we got after Davy. So the next one, as you alluded to, is a Limestone offensive lineman, Owen Spell. If that school Limestone rings a bell, it's because we also got a wide receiver transfer from there in December, DJ Black. Difference is DJ Black led,
yeah, I mean, that was a different story.
Yeah, he led the team and was one of the leaders in all of D2 in touchdowns. He had like 12 TDs, almost 900 yards, had really a breakout year. At least he's got some really good experience.
But DJ Black didn't start at Limestone either.
That's correct. He started at it was a big school. Was it Oklahoma or Ohio State? It was an SEC. I want to say Kentucky. I want to say it was definitely an SEC school. I can't remember which one, but you're right. He did. Yeah, maybe it was Ole Miss. You're right. And then he went down to Limestone, came back up. So it is a difference between Owen Spell. Owen Spell is hard to really find any sort of tape or anything on him. All I could say about him, he's originally from Georgia, played at Wayne County High School. He's fitting the mold. I mean, Roger, you kind of hit the nail on the head when that Frost is not going to be getting those smaller, kind of shiftier O-line. He's been getting all really big dudes. And Spell is 6'8", 310 pounds. He's getting close to rivaling Paul Rubelt's size there. But he didn't have a single offer out of high school. He wasn't ranked as a transfer or as a high school prospect. There really was not much on him that I could find. He played a little bit at Limestone, but there was not much about him. So this has clearly got to be a depth play. Obviously, UCF just lost a couple of offensive linemen outgoing in the portal. So I think Spell is purely a depth piece. Maybe DJ Black talked him up as a former teammate. I don't know. But, this is going to be a depth play here.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I'm trying to pull the school that DJ Black came from.
So it was Ole Miss, I think you're right. It was Arkansas, Ole Miss, Kentucky. What was it?
Was either South Carolina. It was either South Carolina or Ole Miss. I can't remember, but either way,
it was South Carolina. I just looked.
Yeah, there you go.
South Carolina.
Yeah.
So you're right. He obviously had bigger time experience before kind of moving down.
Yeah, and again, it's just the difference. And the reason I brought up Slippery Rock because Limestone is on that same tier. Do you guys know what the connection to UCF is with Slippery Rock?
No.
They used to be in the same conference as we were in Division III. So Slippery Rock was one of the first universities that we were playing when we started the program in D3. So that's what you're dealing with Limestone is my point. That's the caliber of athlete, right? No shade to the OGs, but it's a little bit different than what we're dealing with here.
Yeah. All right. Well, so not much to say about Owen Spell. Next, though, as we alluded to, is another FAU transfer. I want to say this is our fourth FAU transfer in this cycle. Obviously, we know Cam Flancher came from there. Another one of our DB transfers from the fall also came there. Now we land a second DB from FAU, and that's Jayden Williams. This is a guy definitely I am excited about. Comes out of Valrico, Florida, played at Bloomingdale High. They have a not one of the top programs in Tampa, but definitely, or, West Central Florida, whatever you want to call it, but Valrico, they have a fairly proud program. They were top 3 team in the state as recent as 2021. So he definitely comes from a real good high school program. They've been a little bit down recently, but as a prospect, he was a top 300 player in Florida, ranked as a 3-star guy. He's just about 6 foot, 185 pounds. And he was a fairly significant player for FAU. He was voted as a co-captain last year on defense for the Owls, and probably had his best year as a college athlete last year. Did have some injury concerns, but played half the season, 6 games, where he did have a career high 2 interceptions last year, had 3 pass breakups, a fumble recovery, and also 26 tackles. So probably had his best year despite only playing in 6 games due to those injuries. Been pretty productive. Has played since a freshman. He's going in to be a redshirt senior. He's played at least 4 games every single season. So is a guy that has plenty of experience. 30 games overall in college, all spent at FAU. So we get, a nice redshirt senior with a lot of experience, comes from a real good high school and has a pretty good track record, and obviously a leader as a co-captain. Had a couple really strong games last year for FAU. Had probably his best game against Michigan State, playing against a Power 4 school. So I think this is a guy that could definitely make an immediate contribution, especially when you talk about, UCF obviously losing multiple DBs in the portal, not only in the fall, but most recently here in the spring, where, like we mentioned, Cedric Hawkins being one of them. So this is a guy that I think can come in and play right away and has the experience, played at FAU all 4 years, had some good years there. So I think it's exciting to get. He's long, he's athletic, he's fast. He looked really good on tape. Played some of his best games against Power 4 competition, even though, FAU is in the AAC. They've, historically do play some big teams in their non-conference. They played Alabama recently. They've played, obviously, Michigan State, played a couple other big schools. So, yeah, so I do think that this is a solid get for UCF in the secondary.
Yeah, I agree. 3-star kid, originally out of high school. Like I said, for me, I think he's a good get. Him and Davi are the 2 exciting ones out of the folks that are transferring in. How about Jefferson Lafontant?
Yeah, this is now, okay. He is, I think, an interesting prospect. He does seem a little small for a defensive tackle, 6'3", 290 pounds. He is entering also his senior year, so I don't know, maybe he'll get a little bit bigger in the UCF weight room. He played for Bethune-Cookman. This is a school UCF plays every few years, obviously, as our FCS opponent.
And former rival for UCF when our program was smaller.
And former rival. He has some, he played decently this year. He had 18 tackles. He had a career high 2 sacks. He had a forced fumble. So he definitely was a playmaker for them. Not their top DT, but a guy that did play, did well. Obviously, Bethune-Cookman had a pretty tough year. They went 2-10, so wasn't a lot of highlights for Bethune. But Lafontant played. He did play at North Miami Beach High, another local school around here that has a pretty strong history in high school football. This to me definitely feels like a depth play, a DT at the Big 12 level when you're playing teams like that are really big on the lines, like a Kansas State or someone like that. I feel like 290 is kind of tiny, just relative to some of these other DTs that we have had recently, like a Ricky Barber or a Lee Hunter or someone like that. So again, this probably not the most exciting one, but definitely a depth play, and doesn't hurt considering that we did lose quite a few tackles to not only graduation like Ricky Barber, and also in the portal like Lee Hunter. Okay. So we definitely needed some depth there.
Let me bring this up because you mentioned Ricky Barber specifically. His playing weight was 295. He was 6'3", 295.
I guess I'm just comparing everyone to Lee Hunter.
Yeah, I think so. He was 6'3", 295. So you definitely, it also depends on what you're tasking the defensive tackle to do in your defense. Like some guys are gap fillers, and other guys are guys that are going to get after the quarterback or try to get after the running back in the back.
We're talking gap stuffers. Those are like the Lee Hunters, or gap shooters, and those are like the lighter guys who get in the backfield. You want to have versatility too. Like it's it's not like the 70s, 80s where you just want 3, 4 just behemoths just to eat blocks and just call it a day. No, you want guys that can stop the run. You want guys that can hold 2 blockers to keep your linebackers free. But you also want guys who, if you give them a one-on-one, can go try to get a sack or cause pressure and wreak havoc. So obviously, you get the best of both.
Especially for those teams that like to run side to side or use pass
outside zone.
Yep, exactly.
A lot of bubble stuff. Guys that, because that's what, and I don't want to go off on a tangent, but like those really good Georgia football teams the past few years, the reason they lose is when you make them, those big boys, run. And what's crazy is they actually do run well. Like those are the freaks. But ideally, you tire them out so that you get into the third quarter, late second, third quarter. Those big boys aren't trying to run all day. I mean, they're big for a reason. They're not trying to run all day. And that goes across everywhere. And that's where their pad level gets bad. That's how you can start moving them. That's where you start seeing guys like Lee Hunter in the fourth quarter. They get tired. They're getting driven back 2-3 more yards than they were in the first quarter when they were fresh. So it's good to have that versatility.
By the way, before we talk about the last and most recent transfer, I do want to point this out. Trey, that is a Florida Marlins hat, right?
Yeah, Florida Marlins.
Okay, just want to make sure people see that that's not a UF hat. So
no.
Just want to point that out. We don't roll with that around here.
I don't rep any other Florida schools.
All right. As you shouldn't. And it's questionable in the Nebraska too. All right. Let's go ahead and Alan, let's wrap it up with Chris. Okay. I'm going to try this one too. Domercant or Domercant?
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine on that one. Yeah, I mean, again, this is a guy originally was at Stonehill, another one of those, I don't know what programs, but transferred into Chattanooga in 2023. Does not look like he played at all last year. I don't know if that was due to injury or what the reason was there. But, at Stonehill, he played quite a couple of years there, had his career. He's had 85 catches for 1,520 yards and 16 TDs over 24 games. So was fairly productive at Stonehill. His best year was in 2021. We had 38 catches for 800 yards and 9 TDs. Was first team All Northeast Conference that year. So definitely had some production at the lower levels. Again, this definitely feels more like a depth play. UCF obviously just lost a couple of receivers in the portal there with Case and Stokes going. And so, obviously there's Kobe Hudson to graduation, a couple other guys, Jacoby Jones, which we'll get into in a little bit. But UCF has already landed, I think, this would be their 5th wide receiver in this portal cycle overall. So again, this feels like a depth play when you think about the transfer. They already got some big guys from like Florida, like a Marcus Burke, some name guys. And then you also talk about all of the returning wide receivers from that 2024 class that we've all been really excited about, that we think, didn't get a fair shake or didn't play, or whether it's just RJ Harvey dominating and we weren't an air first team, whatever. There's plenty of, depth in just pure quantity at wide receiver. So this just feels like a depth play, but it is someone that has played, has some history, has some experience, but again, definitely feels a little bit more like a depth play. But, solid get, 6'1", 190 pounds, originally from Massachusetts. Didn't really had 0 offers coming out of high school. So, someone that wasn't really on the radar, but we'll see. He didn't play for Chattanooga, so he actually hasn't played any football since 2023. So, probably has a little bit of rust and everything, but, could be a solid depth play again. Not every wide receiver is going to play. So I think we see what Frost is doing here with some of these guys, and he's clearly just kind of building the depth with guys that he knows will probably work hard, will have the right attitude, and probably, fit the culture he's trying to create here at UCF.
Special teams guy is what I'm thinking right there.
That's probably fair.
Yeah, and I had to look up the school because I was curious. It's in Easton, Massachusetts, and has an enrollment of 2,500 with a 77% acceptance rate. So that should tell you everything you need to know. All right. Depth guy. All right. So let's go ahead and swib it since that's what we're going with now. Let's talk a little draft day. Lots of excitement there for UCF and a surprise and a good one in RJ Harvey.
Oh, yeah.
That was the number one most exciting thing for me out of this draft. RJ Harvey going in the second round. We thought when we were talking about this, we had said all along he'd be a third or fourth round guy. Yep. There was a lot of running backs and a fairly good running back class that came out this year, right? So this was going to be a competitive one. And he goes with the 60th overall pick to the Broncos, which is exciting because my son, because of my ex-wife, is a Broncos fan because she was from Colorado. So anyway, you didn't see the face I just made if you're listening on the podcast, but I'm not happy about that. All right, Alan, take us through draft day. What were your takeaways from draft day this go round?
Yeah, that was really exciting. I thought that we were not going to see any UCF players go in the first two, maybe even the first three rounds. You had heard some buzz early on that RJ might be at best a third round pick, but then you heard that he could drop as low as some predictions were even the fifth, for whatever various reasons, smaller, whatever, which he's not, but seemed to be overshadowed by, like you said, this was a very deep running back class. I think there was 2 or 3 running backs taken in the first round, which you don't see anymore. I mean, running backs do not go in the first round anywhere like they used to, but you saw, I mean, obviously Ashton Genty went 6th overall. You had a couple other running backs. Then you even had the Big 12 that had all these guys that were, the name guys, right?
Ollie
like
Gordon, Taj Brooks, like all
Scattaboo, all these guys that, remember, also, were given all Big 12 honors over RJ, which we all complained about as UCF fans. So I wrote a tweet that got, some considerable buzz. I said, RJ went over Scattaboo, Taj Brooks, and Ollie Gordon in the draft. That is the ultimate kind of last laugh for RJ. He got drafted the highest out of any of the Big 12 backs. He was the 7th running back taken overall in the entire draft. So, yeah, it was a pleasant surprise. But, Denver obviously does not have, a great running back situation. They had Jayden Williams, who's kind of been a bust. He's been injured a lot. So, I think he has a chance to immediately go in there and start and be a playmaker with a young QB like Bo Nix. So real exciting. Obviously, RJ had a very dynamic, workouts with the teams, had a great pro day, had a great combine overall, really turned some heads. And you saw that materialize with the 60th overall pick. So I'm really excited for RJ. I think that's awesome. One of the highest draft picks we've had in quite some time, since Richie Grant went in the second round, the highest since then. So that's a big pickup. To hear his name was pretty surprising because you didn't really hear that prediction, that buzz from any of the guys like Schefter or Mel Kiper that he was going to go high. So for him to go to Mile High, and potentially look like he's probably, unless he, doesn't look good, he's probably going to be locked up the starting position because they don't really have another running back option there. So I was really, really happy for RJ. We all know he's a hometown hero. He's an Orlando guy. He's a guy that turned down money his final year to stay at UCF and turned out to be, whether he's the greatest or the second greatest running back in school history. Someone that we all love, fans can get behind. I think we're all going to be rooting for him in Denver next year.
Yeah, converted quarterback too, right? I remember when
which makes it even more impressive.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, he did play a little bit of running back in his youth, but not very much. He was primarily a quarterback. But just a hard work story. And I think, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, right? But this whole Shedeur Sanders saga thing, you're talking about Shefty and, how he got that one way wrong, and it has a lot to do with the quality. I think this draft, the quality of the individual was looked at a lot more highly, especially and a lot of these GMs talked about it, is the transfers and what kind of players these guys are. They don't care about football was what you heard. And then you have someone like RJ Harvey, who's the complete opposite of that. And I think that carries weight when you get to the pro leagues. And I think that just the person he is, and quite frankly, he's an excellent running back. I mean, he was two, for leading the nation as far as running backs were concerned. He can catch out of the backfield. He has the ability to cut. He's not a one cut type of back. He has patience. He has all of the things we talked about while we were watching him. He deserved better from the folks that were around him. But RJ Harvey is a heck of a running back, and he carried the load, and everybody knew he was going to carry a big load, which made it even more difficult. And then when you go back and you think about the quarterbacks that we had in the past, they were running quarterbacks. And so what does that mean? That means people are going to load the box, which means he was doing this against teams that were we didn't have as strong of a passing game under Gus Malzahn. So they were loading the box. They were coming after him, and he produced the way he did in spite of all that. So, if anybody deserves it, you should be rooting for him. He deserves it. And he's got Denver's getting a heck of a talented running back who will put his nose to the grindstone and do whatever he needs to do to be successful in the NFL for as long as he can. And so I'm excited. Kudos, tip of the cap. He's got a $7 million 4-year guaranteed contract going at that round. So he earned his money in college, and love RJ Harvey, and we'll root for him. That's one of the few once a night, always a night kind of guys.
And that's mostly the things, like, because Alan was like, when you talked about, like, he doesn't really have holes in his game. Like, and then when he went to the combine and just blew the doors off the 40, like, that was really his only, like, question mark, was how fast he'd run. And then, like, yeah, he's a smaller guy, but again, he's a big guy.
He's built like a tank. Yeah. I mean,
if he's 5'8 and a half, 5'9", yeah, he might be 205, 210 pounds, but that is like a walking muscle. Like, it's compact.
His thighs, let me put it this way. His thighs are probably as big around as my chest. Let's just put it that way.
Like, he's a stoutly built guy. So, and then I think the only thing, like, again, it was just his age, which, I mean, how long do running backs really last anyway in that sense? But, like, that was really his only knocks.
The average is 2.5 years if you want to know the statistic.
Yeah, so, like, him going second round, I'm not going to lie, I was surprised. But it wasn't because of what he put on the football field. I can definitely tell you that. That was never going to be his question. And, again, like you said, it's great to see the guys who stick it out. Because, again, I come up here all the time. I'm like, if somebody would have offered me $1 million to leave, I would have left. And that doesn't matter where you're at. I just think there's some amounts of money you can't say no to. And the fact that he stuck it out, stuck it through, and
see, that makes it even worse that you left for free, Trey.
Oh, man, listen.
Come on, bro.
Listen.
We went over that. I got to needle you a little bit over that.
Yeah, but, like, that just shows to, like, I'm glad that it paid off for him. Because, again, I'm like, golly. We went 4-8. That's not – sometimes teams are like, you know what? They can't – if they went 4-8, they don't have that much talent. And sometimes it's the complete opposite. But
look what happened. We were talking about the Big 12 awards. RJ outperformed all of those guys.
Yeah.
Right? Ollie Gordon was the leader the year before. RJ was the leader this year, and they still gave it to Cam Skattebo. And so if you don't think the fact that platform matters and the fact that we went 4-8 one year, if you don't think that affects his ability to be picked up or be taken more seriously by the NFL or get that spotlight on him,
100%.
I don't know what to tell you. But Denver saw
the stage. Yeah, I mean, and, like, the bigger the stage, the more eyes are on you. Everybody watches the big games. Cam Skattebo, people remember him. I mean, we know him just because we are in the conference. Most people only know him for his game against Texas in the playoff. Majority. That's how they know him, because they're like, who's this guy that's being a beast? So, like, in our heads, we're like, even when we played, we're like, listen, it's a lot harder back then. We need to play on New Year's. That was always our goal. We have to play on New Year's because then people will realize how talented we really are. You know, that's the truth about it. And it wasn't necessarily about us, yeah, but like everybody's always like, wow, UCF, they have really good players. They have actual NFL guys on our team. I tell people all the time, yeah, we weren't the Alabamas where our third strings were NFL guys, but a lot of our first stringers and some of our second string guys were NFL guys. So
the rest were Canadian Football League guys. They were all CFL guys.
Who?
The rest of them.
Yeah. And that's not even a knock because there's a lot of great CFL football players that, again, they don't even get talked about just because it's not American football. But, like, we had so much talent. And, again, if you don't win, you get overlooked in every aspect. Coaches, awards, all of that. So,
all right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to our second quasi-surprise. I think Mac McWilliams. Let's talk about Mac McWilliams a little bit. We mentioned him earlier. He went in the 5th round to the Eagles. We saw what he could do here, and he played in the various bowls, postseason bowls that were out there. Senior bowls, etc. And he impressed a lot of scouts. Those are great opportunities for people that are bubble kind of guys to kind of separate themselves. And he's the first defensive back since 2021. So what do you guys think about the Eagles picking up Mac McWilliams?
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy that kind of flew under the radar, I think, with UCF fans. Obviously, one of those G5 transfers that we, from UAB, we weren't sure about. Kind of came on later on in the year when some other DBs didn't pan out like we thought they would. But, he had that early pick I think it was against the FCS school that we played, then kind of fell off for a little bit, but then came on strong again as the year started to close out. And, he was talked about. I mean, he got invited to the combine, had a good combine. I don't think it was someone initially when the year started we expected to be an NFL prospect, but he did. He proved it on the field. So yeah, I think it was a surprise, especially when you compare it to a guy that we all know really well in BJ Adams, who didn't get drafted, a guy that is a 4-year starter for UCF pretty much from the second he stepped onto the field. And then definitely, there were some stats about him when balls were thrown his way. I don't, something like he gave up only like 3 completions or something crazy like that. So, when you started to hear BJ Adams go name a lot, and Mac McWilliams, I think, kind of fell under the radar, but ultimately taken with the 5th round by the Eagles, lands on the Super Bowl champions. So I think that's a really, good landing spot for him. And I think he has a really good chance to make the team and maybe, I don't know, what his role will be. I think the NFL.com graded him out as a likely backup. I think it was like a 5.99 he was graded, which is considered a likely backup, but let's see what he can do. And it was exciting that, again, we got, for the second year in a row, we got multiple players drafted. So even in a down year when we were 4-8, to have a guy on each side of the ball go in the top 5 round, I think was great. And it's cool to see, especially, I think, we're going to see this more and more, it's going to be transfers that ultimately get drafted. But when you talk about a guy that was only here for 1 year, to go and get drafted, that's kind of cool, kind of shows out that the transfer portal can work, even if it is a 1-year deal, a hired mercenary, whatever you want to call them, comes here for 1 year and still gets drafted. That means that was a transfer that hit. So, good for Mac.
Yeah.
I'm just saying anytime you can pick up a 3rd round draft pick in the portal, I'm not complaining.
Right.
Obviously, you'd love to see it materialize or maximize in that sense. I think he did come on late. But perfect world, you get the Mike Hughes, the guy that comes in, is just the best player on the field and goes 1st round. That's not always going to happen. But just McWilliams played very good football. It wasn't like he was just a bum or underperformed. He played well, especially late. And again, I think that's another guy that he kind of got overlooked because we're losing so many games in the secondary. A lot of it, you can do something right, but if everybody else kind of gets beat, it doesn't look like you're in a good secondary. But he also tested extremely well. So, like, I think that's one of those things, like late rounds, you want to bank on really good traits. Like if you're 5'10", 5'11", have good hips and you can run fast, you're going to have a shot, and I think now he's got his shot. Cause I think he ran like 4.4 flat. Like he ran fast at the combine. I remember. Cause I was like, whoa, I know.
I look, here's the thing. And, we were talking about this earlier with the Limestone transfer, and I hate to go back to that again. Right. But this guy came from UAB. He was on the all conference. He was on the all conference team as a freshman. He had his sophomore year, he had 10 pass breakups and an interception. On his junior year before he came to UCF, he had 52 tackles, 9 pass breakups, 2 TFLs, 1 forced fumble, and 1 fumble recovery. When he was coming to us in that previous transfer cycle, he was one of the top guys in the G5 as far as DBs were concerned. And the other thing is he was also UAB's primary punt returner. So not only does he have that not only does he have the fact that he was good at what he did, but he also has that special teams aspect, and players, no matter teams will take.
Oh yeah.
Will take more chances on guys that may not be that, but if they're going to do that, if they can also be a returner or a special teams guy, a gunner, whatever, although gunners aren't as important as they used to be, if they can do that and put them on special teams as well, those are the guys. It's kind of like the journeyman quarterback. Those are the guys that'll stick, not only play in the league, but stick around in the league for a long time.
You'll always have a job.
Exactly.
You'll always have a job. So, and that's the thing, like, he could have a 10-year career if he's just solid guy, shows up and that's the thing where you start talking about, like, just the people. Like, a lot of these kids now don't understand that part of business. We understand it just even in our daily lives as men that work. You have to show up every day because there are people counting on you. They don't necessarily feel that anymore. And I think those kind of guys, that's who lasts long in the NFL. The guys that take care of their bodies, the guys that show up to work every day, that don't take days off, because it all catches back up to you. So they all have their shot. I know Brandon Adams, I think he went undrafted, but he got picked up by the Dolphins. Here's your shot. You have to do something to stand out, whether that's kicking punts, whether that's being the first one in all the special teams drills, trying to be, like that's what you have to do. I think Trayvon Morris Brash almost made the team last year from doing all of these things, so those are the type of guys that last in the NFL, in my opinion.
All right. So those were our 2 draftees. And as you alluded to, Trey, we had some undrafted free agents, which we typically always do. So let's talk about those guys. Alan, let's take them for a spin. Who do you got?
Yeah. So like you said, Roger, we always have guys or undrafted free agents that some of them end up doing pretty well. Like Trayvon Morris Brash had a lights out preseason last year, ended up, making the practice squad. And I think he got called up for a game and played in 1 or 2 games last year. So no surprise that we had some guys. We expected it. The big 2 are obviously Kobe Hudson and BJ Adams. Those were guys that were on the draft radar. They were at the combine. They both received draft grades. The Kobe Hudson not getting drafted isn't super surprising. It was a pretty deep wide receiver draft. He had some issues with drops and things like that. BJ was definitely, he was getting as high as a 4th round grade. So that was a little surprising, but Hudson ends up in Carolina, which I think is a good situation. They did draft a wide receiver pretty high. They also got Colorado, one of Colorado's receivers, the guy that used to play USF. I forgot his
Jimmy Horn. Jimmy Horn.
Yeah, Jimmy Horn. Yeah, he went there. But
they're pretty. I am so mad we did not get that guy. He wanted to. They even put it in his draft notes, like that he wanted to go to UCF. That's how bad it was. Like that was Frost era, wasn't it? When Jimmy Horn was wanting.
I think that was. It might have been. No, I think that was first year. It might have been. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either, but yeah, that was a shame that we ended up not getting him. But you know, so I think Kobe ends up in a good situation there. Bryce Young, young quarterback, needs some weapons. Adam Thielen is there, but he's older. I think they have a couple other guys, but so that could be a good situation. We'll see if he can make the team. Obviously, a talented player, had some issues with drops. The other one, BJ Adams, goes to my hometown, Miami Dolphins, who I was talking with Roger before the show, are very, very thin at DB. And Jalen Ramsey's on the trading block for whatever reason. So they need DBs. So I think BJ definitely has a shot of making the team or at least the practice squad. Then 3 other guys that got picked up, not super surprising. Probably a little more under the radar. Definitely, we did not expect them to be draft picks, so them getting signed is not, as UDFAs is not that surprising. But Amari Kite, offensive lineman, who came over here from Alabama, had a good 2-year run with us, signed over in Seattle. Then you had Ricky Barber, who at one point was expected to be a draft pick. Had some real bad injuries there over the last couple of years at UCF. It was a very productive player ultimately for the Knights for a couple of years there. He ends up in Washington. I don't know, what his prospects are for making the team, but we'll see. And then Jacoby Jones, is he coming back? Is he not coming back? Well, this clearly answers it. Jacoby Jones is not going to be on UCF next year. He ultimately, obviously, took a chance at going pro, and he also got signed by Washington. So those 5 guys do get picked up as UDFAs, priority free agents. And then we had 2 others that signed camp invites, which obviously a lot lesser chance of making a team as a camp invite. But running back Penny Boone, who had a great career before UCF, then came to UCF in a loaded UCF running back room and didn't play, but he got picked up or got invited to camp for Carolina. And then another 1-year transfer DB, Sheldon Arnold, got a camp invite to Kansas City. So those are 7 players that, are getting their turn at potentially going pro, and 5 out of the 7 did get actual contracts.
Yeah, didn't somebody sign like yesterday and with Jacksonville?
Jacksonville. I thought those were the 7 that got signed. The only one that I put this in there, the only one I was surprised is Deshaun Pace. I mean, damn, like Gus was talking about him, kept calling him what did he used to call people? He's a dude, or he's a player, he's a guy, whatever he said.
He did play well. I mean, not
no,
only
he did,
did he play well,
and I'm surprised he was looked at as going to be. I thought he was going to be a draft pick.
Well, he was part of that.
Obviously,
remember, he was part of that Cincinnati team that went to the playoff, and he was part of that vaunted defense for that Cincinnati team, and he was like a freshman or sophomore that year, and there were 3 of them. We got 2 of the 3 that ended up playing for us out of that group. And he just last season he played well the season before, but last season he got injured, and then he just kind of fell off the face of the earth.
Yeah, and he didn't even get a camp invite or anything. So I would say fairly surprising, especially the buzz that he had at Cincinnati, and then even at UCF. He played really well in the beginning of the season, was one of our top playmakers in those first 4 games before everything fell apart. So, I don't know. It's interesting. Maybe he'll still get something, but yeah, that was, I think, kind of a surprise that he didn't land anywhere.
Yeah, I wonder. I didn't follow how they all tested and everything, but I wonder if it was like he was stuck in that tweener kind of role, not big enough to be like a true linebacker, but not. I wouldn't say fast enough because he was pretty athletic. Just not I guess the athletic enough.
No, he was the edge protector. He played a little bit of nickel.
Yeah,
but he was. Here was the big thing. I think Pace went from 80 tackles and 11 TFLs his senior season, or his last season with Cincinnati. He came to UCF and his production dropped. He went to 61 total tackles, and his TFLs went to 3.5. He was more of a guy who would cover a tight end
Yeah.
He was a guy who would rush, edge rush, at Cincinnati. He was that kind of player. He had some speed. He was lanky, but he wasn't like he was a guy that moved around, especially in different defenses, right? Because Cincinnati played that 3-3-5?
3-3-5, yeah.
Yeah, they played a 3-3-5. So he was the guy that kind of moved around in space and could stay with receivers, could stay with the tight end, would flex and come off of a blitz that was disguised and then edge protected, right? He would make sure that he would be on the strong side for edge protection or the weak side for edge protection. So he was injured a little bit last year. So yeah, his production was down, but the big thing was his TFLs. He wasn't getting in the backfield. And the crazy thing about it with him is he got into the backfield a lot, but he took bad angles. So I don't know if it was just because he was playing from a different defense. We played a 4-3, if it was because he was just in a different defense. And so he was taking the wrong angles from that when he was used to having a little more freedom and space. But it really hurt him because I really did when we signed him. There was a lot of buzz nationally around him, and I expected that he would come here and that he would be drafted. I 100% expected him to be drafted, and he wasn't.
Yeah, I'm trying to see what his testing was.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for our UFDA or UFDAs. Yeah, our UDFAs. So let's go ahead and swiv it once again. And let's talk a little bit about our dearly departed quarterback, Dillon Gabriel. And the only reason I'm bringing up Dillon Gabriel is because there was a controversy that happened from a certain Big 12 quarterback from Colorado who also got pranked. By the way, that all came out today. They got pranked during the draft. Hate it for him from that perspective. Nobody deserves to be done that way on draft day. I'm sorry, whoever that was. It's somebody's 21-year-old kid who pranked him. It was a coach's 21-year-old.
The Falcons defensive coordinator.
Yeah, exactly. His 21-year-old kid did that to him. Nobody deserves that. But this is a story because it's a Big 12 quarterback and he was expected to go a lot higher. But this is a story that illustrates what we talked about earlier, which is Shedeur Sanders and the attitude, right? This is a guy who went in and all the stories were coming out pre-draft, just before the draft, that his interviews were terrible. He basically wanted teams he was entitled and teams to build complete systems around him. He wasn't willing to work within a system. It's not a good look when you're showing instead of having a trophy room, you've got a jewelry room that you're putting out everywhere just before the draft. Nobody wants to work with you, bro. And that goes back to what you said, Trey, with George O'Leary and preparing you guys for the draft, and why so many UCF football players at that time got drafted is because he taught you guys how to play like and prepare like NFL players, right? Mm-hmm. And then Dillon Gabriel, who of course was with us and then transferred and then to Oklahoma. We played against Dillon Gabriel. Should have beat Dillon Gabriel. I don't know what Gus was thinking with that play. Whatever. And then went to Oregon. And then now got drafted ahead of Shedeur Sanders. So, it's and on the same team. So the Browns have now picked up, who feels worse? Does Shedeur feel worse, or does Dillon Gabriel feel worse because they got Shedeur and Shedeur was supposed to be the better quarterback?
I don't know. Listen, Dillon Gabriel should feel better because he is going to get more money. That's probably the only thing, because otherwise you can't have any confidence because they still, that whole room is a mess.
He just doesn't project well to the NFL because of his size.
Yeah, if he could be an anomaly like a Drew Brees who's little and accurate, that's not like a Kyler Murray mobile. That's what he's gonna have to be. But again,
the difference was when we saw him play, he was not accurate in the short to mid game. Yeah, he was accurate with his rainbow throws. Yeah, he threw a beautiful ball when it came to dropping.
Deep throws. Oh yeah.
I mean, his deep throws were absolutely a thing of beauty. What's interesting too that I saw was that the guys, all of the draft reviewers said he was like he could get out of trouble and be mobile and whatever. And when he was with us, he was not mobile whatsoever. That's why he got hurt. That's why he got hurt.
Yeah. He definitely worked on his athleticism as the years.
Well, Oklahoma, he moved around a lot more at Oklahoma, but it's frustrating. Let me say this about that. We were all upset when DG moved on, right? There was the whole Mackenzie Milton was the reason that he was here. Mackenzie Milton stepped aside, although Mackenzie Milton was never the Mackenzie Milton of old. He was still our guy, right? And he stepped aside so DG could take the reins and whatever, and went to FSU. When Dillon Gabriel was here and he left, all of us were upset. There's an article out there about his journey that was written pre-draft. And obviously, a lot of these are going to be put out in conjunction with agents. But he wasn't just sock boy. He did a lot of good things. A lot of his NIL or money that he got while he was at UCF was given to charity. So, all I'm going to say about that is I wish you well. I might buy some socks again for you if you came out with some UCF socks, because I feel better about it now that it's been a little bit of distance between. But good luck in the NFL and suck it, Shedeur. All right. Next, let's go ahead and swiv it again. And I have not obviously been here, so I haven't had a pivot poll. So I'm going to have to put something out this week for the pivot poll. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but be on the lookout for that, because we'll get back into the swing of things as far as that's concerned. But I do want to talk a little bit about UCF baseball. So 'tis the season for UCF baseball, softball, and the spring sports. Softball, believe it or not, is still in the running for a regional, which is kind of crazy to think about given where they've been. I love the fact that
they have a lot of really good wins. That's what's keeping them afloat.
Yeah, 100%. Their RPI is number 28 in the country. So they've got two really, really good pitchers. Aubrey Evans is finally finding her stroke again. They're hitting home runs. They were coming on strong, and their hitting was the problem, and it's kind of hitting its stride, so to speak. But then you have baseball, which baseball has been all over the freaking place. This was a team that was red hot coming out. We were expecting for them to, potentially compete for hosting. They were moving up the rankings. They had a good out of conference schedule. They had some big wins, and it reminds me a lot of what our hoops team did early on in the season. Then they kind of fell off, and that vaunted pitching rotation that we had, especially the closers, didn't close very well. And then our hitting kind of slumped. Espinal's still kind of in a slump to the point where he's gotten pulled from the lineup. Sonny D has come back in. He's kind of hit his stride. And this team, this weekend was the perfect example of what's happened to this team. West Virginia, highly ranked. They were ranked number 10 coming into this to this weekend. We were playing them at home. They could have won every single one of these games. But the big bugaboo that's come into play, one, is the closers. We were leading that last game as well, is the closers. So the pitching's kind of fallen apart again. They were back on it again and then didn't again. But the closers were a problem. The other problem is how many players were leaving on base. 36 players left on base in this series. 36. We out hit as much as we were talking about the slumps and hitting. We out hit West Virginia this entire series, the number 10 team in the country. But we left that many players on base. It resulted in a Friday night loss, 1-4. Then a crazy game. This is where the pitching really lost us this game. was 10 to 15. 10 to 15. This sounds like a Wisconsin football game. It doesn't sound like a baseball game, right? And then the last game we lost 3-4. Made a little bit of a comeback, but again, stranding batters everywhere. Until we get that fixed, this team is not going to. But I think this was, we were talking about maybe this team could make a regional, and this West Virginia series would be what makes the difference for us to either take that step forward and continue to work towards our potential or just fold shop. I think what this West Virginia series shows what this team is going to do for the rest of the year. And it's unfortunate because I do think that this team is more talented both in pitching depth and the hitting than last year's regional team, which made it to the regional championship game, right? So it sucks. I was not very happy about this weekend's results, not because, West Virginia wasn't the number 10 team in the country, but they were also a very beatable number 10 team in the country. They were talking a lot of smack in the ballpark. I mean, a lot. Their fans, even their dugout got warned twice in the first game because they were talking so much smack. And this was the two out of 3 of these games were very, very winnable, even with the talent that we had and the way that we were performing in the games. But you cannot leave 36. So Trey was so disgusted he dropped out. You cannot leave 36 batters on base. You can't do that. And I don't know what this team's going to do for the rest of the year. We're playing North Florida as well as a midweek game, and then we're playing at OSU next. So hopefully they bring home the OSU series. North Florida, we better beat North Florida, but at home. But yeah, I'm disappointed in this year's team, and I don't know. We played good small ball earlier. We were seeing the ball well early, and then all of a sudden the bottom dropped out, and then the pitching staff has just fallen out. Now the good thing is we have in the rotation that we found, we have three really, really good sophomores that will be coming back next year that I expect to get a lot of playing time. So we have stuff to build around on the pitching staff. But I don't know. I don't know how we've managed to lose games. We've managed to put ourselves in situations to lose games that we should have won. Let's just put it that way. Alan, do you want to add anything on that?
It just seems, the baseball team, again, kind of having a similar year to last year. There was some hype. Obviously, we talked to Coach Wallace before the season. Seemed pretty jacked up about the season. Supposed to be a good year, year 2 in the Big 12. And yeah, I mean, they're not getting it done in Big 12 play. I mean, we've seen how many series where they've got swept. Sometimes the bats come alive. Sometimes it seems like we can't produce any offense. So, I don't profess to watch the baseball team much, but it is disappointing when, guys like you who follow the baseball team, Ben, talked about this was going to be a good year. And it seems like, it's now kind of starting to it already has kind of circled the drain a little bit. So I don't really know where they go from here, what Coach Wallace can do. It sounds like you said there's some sophomores that are going to be returning. There's some, maybe a decent nucleus coming back, but, it's kind of like the basketball team. You got to start. I know we're in a bigger conference now, a tougher conference with, opponents that are harder week in, week out. But, you want to start to see really in all the sports, and football for that matter too, start to compete in the Big 12 or start to go in the right direction at the very least. I'm not saying that we should be winning the conference in any of these sports yet, but they should start, competing. But, we've been really in the bottom half in conference play in most of the major sports. Baseball,
well, I think that's the key designation there, the major sports, right? The 3 revenue producing sports and men's basketball and men's football. Tennis has done really, really well. I mean, they lost the champion, both men's and women's lost the championship game. But they've done really well. Softball is rebuilding with a bunch of freshmen and sophomores. We were a senior Latin team last year, and they're starting to find their stride, right? Golf, we don't talk about golf on here. They've done really well. Rowing, we've talked about them a little bit because of Coxswain Karaoke. Watch the previous show with Josh Lazar if you don't know what I mean. They've done really, really well. It's the three major sports that are disappointing. So, a lot of people, let me ask you this. Do you think that's a byproduct of the leadership in Terry Mohajir, or do you think it's something else? Because I will say this, we've been trending down and there's a lot of noise now around Terry Mohajir and whether he's the right leader for the major revenue sports. So I'm interested to hear what you think from that perspective, as far as putting winning teams and losing our brand identity as the winner. I mean, coming into the Big 12, everybody said who was going to be the most successful program, UCF. Mm-hmm. What we've been passed in some ways in the major revenue sports by some of the other schools. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think obviously everything starts from the top. I think losing some of our identity, that's got to be attributed to Terry because he's at the top. He's our leader when it comes to the athletics program, but he hires the coaches and the coaches bring in the players. Blame has to fall, I think, on the coaches and the players. I mean, if you want to blame Terry for hiring Dawkins hiring Wallace or hiring Gus Malzahn.
Well, sure. Hold on. Wallace isn't in this conversation. He went to a regional last year, his first year.
All right. So let's just say that
not firing Dawkins and
not firing Dawkins, hiring Coach Malzahn. Sure, he definitely gets some blame for that, but the coaches still have to perform at the end of the day. It's not like, I guess budget is a thing that can come from Terry and how he chooses to allocate and things like that. But, the football program had plenty of talent. I think the coaches deserve blame. Let's just say in a crazy world, Danny White was still here and he was the one to have hired Gus Malzahn. Yeah, you can make the case he would have never hired Gus Malzahn. Whatever. Let's just say that he did. I don't think Gus Malzahn would do any better. He's the coach who he is. I mean, he is who he is. We know exactly what he is. He did it at Auburn. He did it at UCF. So I think the coaches share a lot of that blame in not performing in their respective sports. And maybe and Terry deserves blame too. He's keeping on to Johnny too long. Maybe he kept on to Gus too long. He made the wrong decision in hiring him. But the resources were there, especially for football, to be more competitive than 4-8. And that was, I think, purely a coaching thing. I don't care who our AD was. Malzahn clearly just didn't have enough, just talent, I guess, as a coach to succeed, because we got plenty of recruits. We all talked about last year, or this past year, how well UCF did in re-recruiting their own players. They had very minimal damage in the portal. They were able to stave off a lot of big programs, get a lot of donors to contribute to keep this team together, and bring in a lot of big name guys. And it didn't work out. And I don't think that's Terry's fault. I think that's the coaching staff. So, do we need a new AD? Maybe that's a different conversation. But I do think the coaches are the one that choose the players. The coaches are the ones that make the playbook. The coaches are the ones that develop the kids and make all the big decisions around the on-field stuff. So I think you got to put some blame on the coaches. But, if you want to say, well, the coaches are hired by the AD, I guess you can go, and the argument can get very circular very fast. But I do think Terry doesn't deserve all the blame for this.
Okay. Well, you heard it first here. From Alan Levin, our IG star. So make sure you hit up our socials if you agree or disagree, or throw your comments on there. As for me, you're right within the context of the conversation as to whether Terry Mohajir is the right AD for us. I think we may pick that up on another show now that it's the off season. But within the context of the performance, I think performance is the coach's fault. The decisions that are made to bring those coaches on in the evaluation, and then also what you do while they're here. Dawkins is the example. Everybody knows how I feel about that. This was the year, I think. And I understand it's a financial decision, and we won't start getting those Big 12 checks until next year. But our budget is a lot higher, and we've had more talent than we've ever had. Going back to, the AAC days and everything else. And I just think that he better hope Scottfrost works out. That's all I got to say when it comes from a performance perspective. And then we'll have that discussion later on Terry Mohajir. But there's a lot of people and the fan base seems to be divided on whether he's the right fit on a go forward basis. So I hope for his sake that Scott is showing some life. I hope for our sake that he shows some life this upcoming football season, because that's the only thing that's going to keep him out of the doghouse as far as I'm concerned, other than the fact that we're doing the tower. But that tower only goes so long. All right. With that being said, we're going to stop with the hate and talk a little bit about love and the listener love. So shout out to, again, everybody who's watching, commenting, liking. Make sure you keep doing that. We had over 12,000 views just in this last month alone. So thank you all for being a part of the show, telling your friends, and dealing with our drivel for that long. That's a lot of time. 17% of you are watching us on TV. I don't know why you would want to see me on TV, but thank you for doing that. I've always had a face for radio. That's why they had me on ESPN for a while. All right. But with that being said, let's go ahead. We had several new subscribers this last week. Unfortunately, you guys are not showing up because you've got your privacy settings to private. So I can't see who subscribed. So I can't shout you out, but whoever that is that's subscribing, thank you very much for subscribing. We did have some interaction with Pitt Stoner, who 1974, who is a frequent contributor in our comments. And this was in response to our short for UCF needing to fire Mamadou after the whole Mustafa Chiem debacle. So Pitt Stoner says, fire him. Didn't he quit? And our response was, hey, Pitt Stoner, he was trying to do a deal with Cincy for weeks and allegedly influenced Chiem during the tournament. Folks were aware and they didn't fire him. It does take a bit for a university to do so. He did end up quitting, but UCF should have fired him. I just don't think they wanted the spotlight on why we were getting the bigs. Pitt Stoner replies, at the end of the day, Chiem is to blame for following him. I don't care about the coach. The player has his own mind and left. So let me respond to that. You've got to remember that the pipeline that was created that Mamadou was tapping into to bring us those bigs, and this goes all the way back to Taco Fall. Taco Fall, actually, to your point, Pitt Stoner, was pressured to leave and didn't, and stayed with UCF and stuck with Dawkins. So shout out to Taco. We all love him. He didn't take this path. However, unfortunately, their immigration status and Mustafa's is tied to his sponsorship by Mamadou. And if you don't think that he was leaning on that when $2 million were at stake, I don't know what else to tell you. He did end up at Cincinnati. I still think that no matter what, whether it was his decision to go or not, I don't care about that. I care more about the fact that he was trying to leverage him with another Big 12 team. He had been doing that for weeks and weeks and weeks before the season was over. He was not showing up to, allegedly, was not showing up to, I'll just put that out there just to make sure we're safe, allegedly not showing up to practices on time or doing his coaching duties. So he was really paid to be a pipeline, which is why I think UCF did not want this out in the media. but he should have been fired by UCF for the way this was handled. And the fact that he told allegedly Mustafa Chiam that he should take it easy in the Crown tournament so that he didn't get injured. And, Cincinnati was working this deal the whole time, even before the Crown started. So I'm sorry. I'm still of the opinion that he should have been fired. Alan, what do you think?
That the assistant coach should have been fired, said?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's total. I mean, it's a college athletics has always been filled with greed, whether it was, the NCAA or the schools themselves, administration. To hear a coach, doing this now is not surprising. They now can kind of attach themselves to kids because a lot of these kids are going to get paid a lot more than any assistant coach, any at least, above average to top level player has a very good chance of making more than the average assistant basketball coach at especially a school like UCF where the coaching budget isn't huge. So if they can have a really good relationship with a kid and attach themselves to it and get themselves some money, I'm not surprised it's happening. The fact that it happened under, Dawkins' watch and right under his nose, I mean, I don't know if he knew.
Yeah, he absolutely knew this was going on. I mean, this guy wasn't.
He should have.
If it's true, which I've got a pretty good source as to the fact that this is true for years, that this guy wasn't showing up for various for team activities, for practices, for things like that. He 100% knew exactly what was going on, and that's why I don't think they fired him. Although I don't think it's a good look.
Yeah, it's not a good look, and he should have been fired. Dawkins should have taken action, and that's another kind of thing of we just talked about Terry. I mean, Terry obviously knew this too. You should know this, and that again starts with the leadership at the top. I mean, the head coach should have taken care of this, and the fact that also Chiam, if he did actually listen to that advice and take it easy is super lame. You should have. I would have honestly rather him say I'm sitting out, and I'm not going to risk injury or whatever.
I mean, but look at this. Ben during the Crown tournament said that Mustafa. One of the things that Mustafa is really good at is he has the ability to be athletic enough to get back on defense. And Ben actually pointed it out during the tournament that he was not doing that. He was like, I don't know what's going on. He's not doing that.
Right.
That goes to show you he was listening to that advice during that time,
which is lame. And it's sad that that's where we're at, with, there's so many things wrong about college athletics. And I think prior to this NIL and transfer portal era, we knew that there was problems then, whether it was, kids, not being properly compensated and getting in trouble for the most ridiculous things. I mean, they can't make it. I mean, just like, the Donald De La Haye example, like stuff like that, where you can't make money off of YouTube. I mean, that was ridiculous. But now we've just swung so far to the other side where it's sad because look at the average Twitter, Instagram posts, all these things when you see these crazy transfer stories, like most people are saying, like, I'm losing interest in college sports. It's ruining it. And if you like college sports, you're passionate about it. It's a passion that you love for the 3-4 months a year that it's around. And, someone like me,
Alan, just because you don't watch it for the rest of the time doesn't mean it isn't around all year. It's just different sports.
Okay, I'm talking about the sports that people are passionate about. I mean, if you're passionate about like college women's rowing, good for you. I mean, that's great. I don't know how prevalent the transfer portal is in those other sports. I'm talking about the sports that make the headlines. Let's just be honest. So football, basketball, baseball to a degree, really it's football and basketball. We know that. I mean, look at the average coverage nationally of the other sports. It's not anywhere near as prevalent as those two. But the point being just like, it feels like it's just stuff like this is just the transition we've made to this new era has not gone smoothly, and it's really taken a lot of the charm and a lot of the likability out of it. Like, I'm all for guys getting paid, but it needs to just swing back to the middle where there's some sort of regulations, something that makes you got to keep college sports special, and it doesn't feel like it.
There is some attempts to that because even some of the bigger schools are being hurt by it, right? And we'll talk about that
Yeah.
a little bit later, and you start to see the SEC standing up there with the Big 12 and Big 10 and all of them complaining about it, and we're at the power level versus where we were as far as the G6 is concerned. So that's another topic that we'll talk about this off season. Let's go ahead and finish this out. Great conversation. Thank you, Pitt Stoner, for commenting and having dialogue with us. If everybody who's out there, tell your friends, make sure you're doing that. Shout out to UCF alum. He said, great show last week or the week before. And we appreciate you. Always a listener and commenter. And at Mike, who always communicates with us during the show. We appreciate it. It keeps the dialogue going and keeps us heading in the right direction. With that being said, let's go ahead and swiv it. Swiv it to Alan's oxymoronic stat of the week. I don't see one in the notes. Do you have one?
I do.
All right, let's do it.
All right. So obviously, big news of the week is the draft. So I wanted to give a little bit of draft statistics. So RJ Harvey, running back, is not a position that UCF gets drafted to often historically. RJ is just the 6th running back in school history to be drafted, and the first since Storm Johnson in 2013. So that was
crazy.
About a 12-year gap since we had a running back. And it's so funny because we always talk about, especially from the Frost era on, how deep our running back rooms have been. I know we had smaller guys like an AK and all that, but the running back rooms were deep, and that's obviously not to put anyone down. Obviously, McCray's having a great career in the CFL and guys like that. But RJ is the first running back drafted since Storm, and he's the only running back in school history to be drafted in the 2nd round or higher. So Kevin Smith was drafted in the 3rd round. Latavius Murray is drafted in the 3rd round, but RJ is the only one in the 2nd round or higher. And the last time that UCF had an NFL all-pro player on offense was Latavius Murray in 2013. So maybe we get our next all-pro player in RJ Harvey. Also, RJ is the highest drafted player since Richie Grant went 40th overall in 2021. So first guy to go in the 2nd round since obviously Richie. Then kind of transitioning over to Mac McWilliams. Mac is actually the first defensive player drafted since Kalia Davis in 2022. So it's been all offense for the last 3 years. So finally get another guy on defense. Obviously the first DB drafted also since 2021. We had Richie Grant drafted, Aaron Robinson, and Tay Gowan. And now with Mac McWilliams' draft, that officially makes 15 UCF defensive backs drafted, the most of any position. Obviously number 2 is wide receiver with 13. But now DB has a nice little lead there. And we hopefully continue the tradition of having some really, really good secondary players in the NFL, which historically has been, the best position for UCF in the pros, whether it's in the draft or actually just how they perform on the field as a pro. So exciting stuff. And that is my my oxymoronic fact of the week.
All right. Several facts, and making up for the fact that we don't have Josh's sometimes funny fact of the week this week because Josh is not here. He's somewhere in Myrtle Beach partying it up in a high side. I don't know.
I could do a quiz question for you if you want me to throw something in there.
All right. Let's do something quick.
All right. This is going to be a little tough. I mean, you have to really know your deep UCF history here to probably get this one. But I mentioned that there's been 6 running backs drafted for UCF. Can you name those 6 running backs?
All 6?
Yeah.
Okay. We named Latavius Murray. Are we including RJ Harvey?
Yeah.
So RJ, Latavius, and Kevin Smith, obviously.
Mm-hmm. One other I just mentioned, the most recent.
Johnson is 4.
Yep. And the other two are way back there.
Yeah.
They are in 1996 and 1987.
Yeah, I'm not going to remember them.
Okay. It is Marquette Smith
Marquette
and
Smith. Yep, I remember.
And Elgin Davis.
Elgin Davis. Yep. Both record holders here at UCF as well.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's go ahead and swiv it and talk about the other sports that you do not watch. So do you actually, since you did the notes on these, do you want to do that or do you want me to do it?
I actually think these are the notes from last week. I realized I did not update this. Usually Josh does this.
Yep, exactly. So let me start with this. I don't know if they're still number 18 because they lost the championship, but there is an update this week because men's tennis did finish out the season last week in the championship game, the Big 12 championship game. Unfortunately, did not win said Big 12 championship game, despite having beaten their opponent throughout the season. That being said, they are hosting for the second time in history. They are hosting the first and second rounds of the championship, the NCAA championship. And again, this is only the second time in history that we've done this. So that's super exciting. Women's tennis, we don't know where they're going to be yet as far as the NCAA tournament is concerned. But they will be in the tournament. I don't know where they're going to play yet. But that's an exciting team to watch as well. Softball we talked about earlier. They had the walk-off senior night, or not walk-off, the run rule senior night win against Houston, won that series. So that's exciting. And then, yes, number 25 rowing, they did place really, really well at the Longhorn Invite. So we talked a little bit about the head coach for UCF being a former coach at the Longhorns. We didn't know how they were going to place there because Texas is one of the highest rated. Number 2 Stanford was there. Number 22 Oklahoma was there. So that was a tough field for sure. But they wrapped up with 3 first place finishes, placed really, really well on during the invitational. And the big thing with rowing, because remember, they're ranked number 15. They were number 25 the last time we talked about rowing, and then they were going to go into the Texas Invitational. They are a ranked team at number 15 and placed really, really well, and are going to be going to Miami for senior day. They'll be at Lake Pickett for senior day to take on Miami next. So this team, again, we talked about how well rowing is doing this year. They went from number 25 to number 15 in the country. So this team has always hovered around the top 25 or been in the top 25, but I don't believe they've been that high yet. Congratulations to the ladies. As we said last week, Josh is going to be doing some karaoke at Lake Pickett at some point. We're trying to get with the rowing team to allow that to happen, and he's going to do a little coxswain karaoke. All right, folks, we're an hour and 52 in. Thank you all for following along, listening, subscribing. Tell your friends. Make sure you interact with us on our socials, on X or Twitter. I still call it Twitter, IG, our comments. And look out for shorts because we will be posting shorts as we move along, whether it's Josh from a baseball game or it's cut-ups from the show. We appreciate all your support. Go Knights and
charge on.
Charge on, baby. This is where we talk random stuff because this is what Josh is supposed to be doing.